still working with Ripple at all as a company? I know that there
So,
was, some extracurricular, activity that was working its way through the courts, but and it's since been resolved. But I'm curious if there's ongoing discussions, since one of their primary focus is on the interbank settlement component that you're also touching.
so frankly, Ripple's probably the only topic I can't talk about. So
Fair.
I just don't talk about it.
Uh,
Like I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it.
and the genesis for this call, really,
Yeah.
you're at least on an announced basis, working with two larger and more forward-thinking central banks, at least so it seems, on their central bank digital currency plans. What can you say, aside from the fact that these were announced and that the kind of development is ongoing, about the work that's going on with MAS in Singapore and in the ECB and the European Union?
So I must admit, I'm not as familiar with the work with ECB. So I'll talk about MAS, but also I'll talk about Thailand. So Bank of Thailand has been doing a project called Project Inthnon, where they've been looking at working with, I think, the 8 major banks in Thailand to issue central bank currency onto a quarter ledger. Maybe start with the MAS one, because I think they're now into phase 5. Sort of like phase 5 of the project, and we were not involved in that one, but we were involved in some of the previous ones, and that's been interesting because I guess this is typical of how the Singaporean government runs itself. But the methodical way they've been going through that has been fascinating. The first thing, my attention was first drawn to this a couple of years ago, when one of the phases, it was all about netting, because this is going to sound, I guess, probably sound boring, but it's the problem that arises when you move to full bearer assets. Because why do some payment systems settle net? Why is it that money doesn't move gross like it does across the Bitcoin network? Why is it sometimes a payment takes a while and it has to go through a batch cycle? Well, the answer is, of course, because it's very expensive from a liquidity perspective. Every time you want to make a payment, you have to have the money ready to go, even though you're going to get somebody else to pay you a bit later. Sometimes it's better to batch these things up and net them, and you can transmit between multiple parties a lot of value without actually having to have that much on hand at any given time. I guess it's the reason for things like the Lightning Network and Bitcoin and so forth. And the Singaporean government realized that, and one of the early phases of Ubin wasn't just, hey, can we issue the Singaporean dollar onto a blockchain? It was, can we do it in a way that doesn't completely destroy the liquidity of all the banks who do it? Can we actually show that liquidity savings mechanisms and netting can be done in a way that works? It works with the grain of the blockchain. So one of the things we did, in fact, I think the engineer did it, submitted a patent application. I can't remember now. Is Dave Hudson, who now leads our engineering team, built, I think, the world's first decentralized netting scheme, so all the Corda nodes could use the business process engine that we built for a different purpose, but they're able to talk to each other and figure out, without revealing any private information, what the netting cycles were, so you could settle as many transactions as possible, as fast as possible, whilst keeping within some limits. So I say all that because on the outside, it looks like, hey, wouldn't it be great just to be able to issue a central bank currency either on a wholesale basis or a retail basis? But when you scrape to the detail below it and look at what you need to do in terms of, as I say, netting and all the other things, from an engineering perspective, which I guess is where I sit, it's absolutely fascinating.
Well, you can't introduce a bearer instrument like Bitcoin without some lending infrastructure or nostro vostro infrastructure between the banks that are actually going to use this, right? Because they're two totally different things. If the whole reserve banking system is built on creating new loans and maintaining a reserve ratio, and all of a sudden you introduce an asset where the reserve ratio has to be 100%, it's kind of a non-starter. Right?
It is, but let's imagine we're still based on
the liquidity benefits as well.
Yeah, sure, but let's imagine we still had a fully backed sort of gold-based central banking system. It would still, and let's imagine you had to deliver gold to the bank every time you wanted to make a payment. If you were able to batch up the payments and do it net, you'd have to carry fewer bags of gold through the streets of the City of London. But of course, the downside is it introduces some credit risk. It slows things down. So there's this trade-off.
So that was, you said that was phase 1?
That was one of the earlier phases, and I think they're now up to phase 5, which I need to.
But you're not involved anymore?
not in that particular phase. I think we'll get re-engaged. So we will re-engage, but sometimes you have to figure out where do you put your effort. So we worked on the first 4. We didn't engage in the 5th, and I think we'll be back again soon.
How many phases do you think you'll see for something like MIS until something actually goes live? I don't know if it's 20 phases. I don't know if it's nearing the experimentation like live phase or what.
Short answer, I don't know. I probably given that I wasn't involved in the last phase, I'm probably not the one to talk about that. But it's a fair question.
Where did you leave things at phase 4?
You know what? This is going to sound really weird, given that this is a conversation about CBDC. The answer is I don't actually know, but I can follow up afterwards. I'll get told to give me the answer, and I'll slack you the message.
Well, we could always throw that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So, what are I'm sure as you track the different CBDC initiatives in general, given the work that you have, with these different major parties. What is your impression of who is farthest ahead here? Is it in fact China? Do you have any insight into what's going on with their DCP, electronic payments currency, and the new digital yuan? Are there any other parties that are a little bit ahead of them from a go live standpoint? What should we be thinking in terms of the actual timeline to start seeing at least the pilots here? Because the top rumor is probably that you will see something in at least a couple of provinces in China sometime here.
Yeah, short answer, again, I don't know. China, I'm not close to that one. Infineon seems pretty far forward. I don't know where that is, head to head against neck and neck against MAS. So yeah, I don't know. Something that, and openly, a debate we have internally a lot is the relative speed of retail CBDC against wholesale. So wholesale CBDC, again, it's in some ways less interesting because wholesale banks, sort of commercial banks, already have access to and typically have access to a central bank account. So you could say this isn't changing anything structurally. It maybe just makes it easier for them to settle with each other. And I see those projects are probably further along. You look at retail CBDC. I mean that gets really interesting. But what I've not seen complete engagement with yet, probably across any, certainly this is me looking from the outside because CTO, I'm not involved in all the client projects. Is questions that sound quite basic, but it's things like, okay, so if you have a consumer with a wallet that owns some CBDC, they lose their phone, have they lost their money, or is there a way to sort of recover it? If there's a way to recover it, okay, outside perhaps sort of like the sort of like the social key recovery mechanisms that kind of work but may not. Does that mean the central bank has to open up a call center, or do they do it through the commercial banks? Some of those models, I think some banks are further along, but I don't think I don't think anybody's got all the answers to that yet. There's a lot to be done. It's not enough to say, yeah, we'll have consumer wallets. You've really got to think through about the fact that people can't look after their house keys, they lose their phones, they run out of charge, they get mugged. You need to have an answer for what happens if something goes wrong. And the Bitcoin approach of your keys are everything. It's clearly that's not the answer for someone who's just lost all their money.
Are you still working with Ripple at all as a company? I know that there was some extracurricular activity that was working its way through the courts, but and it's since been resolved. But I'm curious if there's ongoing discussions, since one of their primary focus is on the interbank settlement component that you're also touching.
So frankly, Ripple is probably the only topic I can't talk about. So I just don't talk about it.
Okay. Well, I'll take that to mean that you are likely not working together at the corporate level, but. We'll steer clear of that, and maybe we'll wrap up on the use cases back to the kind of tokenized security element. So the wholesale and kind of back end institutional process we've kind of covered well. Yes, it's a little bit unsexy and it's not as glamorous, but it's kind of the meaningful picks and shovels business that needs to be built first. When do you think a Corda-backed token will first begin trading on some retail accessible exchange, right? It could be a lending instrument. It could be a lot of people are talking about tokenized real estate. Is that something that you will power in the near to medium term, or is the focus still just going to be on the infrastructure and let like the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and some of the more crypto asset focused companies do the initial pilots there?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, for your listeners and viewers, I've mentioned a guy who many of them will know, but maybe not all, Tom McDonald, our co-founder, and it kind of feels like for some of this, what I'm doing is like it's kind of setting up a follow-up interview for him because he could wax lyrical about this. From a technical perspective, I kind of like have a collection of principles for what good examples here would look like. So we have a whole collection of funds live on Corda Network. I took a look at whether it's HQLAX with baskets of government bonds and so forth. I don't know if there's any plans for them or others to issue those tokens on retail-focused exchanges, but there's nothing preventing that. These are accessible, at least if they're retail accessible. There's no technical reason why not. Probably something we may not see in the medium term or the short to medium term though is quarterback tokens carried on the public blockchain. So would you have like an ERC20 token that is backed by something on Corda? It's possible. There's no technical reason why you couldn't, except that there's almost like a philosophical problem or a problem almost that arises from the original censorship resistance piece, which is probabilistic settlement consequences of proof of work and possibly also proof of stake. So if I look at a lot of the projects we're doing, almost like a non-negotiable requirement is that when the underlying platform says a trade is settled, you never get to a point where it becomes unsettled or unconfirmed. And with Core we have that. I'm sure the Fabric claims the same, but you don't have that on the public networks. Hence all these heuristics about how many blocks you wait for. So there's probably some work we should do as a community to figure out either to what extent or when do we believe Ethereum 2.0 or wherever it is will give us settlement finality. Will it ever? If it will, by when? Or if not, how do we bridge the impedance gap mismatch between what the public networks can offer and what institutions actually need, which is finality.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about the final partnership that was kind of meaningful that you were involved with last year on the MasterCard side. So what is the specific engagement with MasterCard and how is it different from some of the other banking payments pilots that you've been working through since day one?
So the MasterCard one's fascinating. I didn't expect this to happen, but they actually attended our customer conference last year and presented on their plans, and all the videos were recorded and they're on our YouTube channel, so it's not secret. And the thing I'd not realized, and maybe not everyone has, is when I think of MasterCard, I think of the card network, I think of MasterCard, Visa, Amex, I think in terms of plastic cards and so forth. What I'd missed is though they also own a lot of domestic payment schemes. So in the UK, for example, they own VocaLink, who run faster payments and the Link network for cards. So and my understanding is they have some of these in other countries as well. And the idea is, well, if we've got the ability to manage payments domestically in different countries, can we stitch these things together to allow us to offer cross-border payments using the infrastructure we already have? So Corda to link the existing investments and infrastructures they have in different countries is the basis. They can do a much better job of presenting it than I can, but that's the basic idea. But the key to understanding it is realizing there are a lot more than just a card company.